and we'll reserve some time at the end for in-audience Q&A. So if you have any questions or you think of any questions during the event, feel free to save that for the end. All right, so we'll move on to panelist introductions. We'll ask that each of you tell us a little bit about yourselves, including your class and major at UCI and what you're doing now.
I guess that's me. Hi, everyone. I'm Janelle Gonzalez. I just graduated last June, so I'm the class of 2020. And since graduation, I work at Mark Thomas full-time. It's a civil engineering firm here in Irvine, and I'm a roadway design engineer.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Enoch. Let's see. So I graduated last year. Go site, and we make software for small businesses.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Inami. I also graduated in June of 2020, so last year. I studied biomedical engineering and also double majored with urban studies. Right now, I'm working as a quality engineer at a company called Reflection Medical. We're a startup medical device company in the Bay Area.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Jensen. I graduated from UCI in 2017, majoring in civil engineering and a minor in management. And I'm now also doing highway design at WSP. And yeah, that's it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jerry. I graduated from UCI back in 2018, majoring in biomedical engineering pre-med. Now I'm still in school. I'm a second year at Western U at the Oregon campus. And yeah, so I'm still in school, many years to go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arun Jayanthi. I graduated back in December of 2020. I'm currently working at General Motors as a software engineer. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of it because my headphones were cutting out. What else would you like me to share?
Anything you'd like to share with us, really?
I can solve the Rubik's Cube in under a minute, and I like playing tennis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fernando Kowal. I graduated in 2019 with a bachelor's in electrical engineering. And currently I work as an RF front-end characterization and validation engineer at Qualcomm in San Diego. So I pretty much test cell phone chips.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rashi Kashyap. I graduated from UCI Engineering in 2019 with a bachelor's in aerospace. Currently working as a stress analysis engineer in Boeing commercial airplanes here in Seal Beach, California. So basically any structural damage that happens to any of the Boeing airplanes comes through our site, and we help them repair those damages.
All right, outstanding photo. So everybody, I'm Mark De La Rosa. I graduated UCI last year, spring, or rather winter 2020, so right before the big old lockdown. I work in Northrop Grumman as an associate electronics engineer, where we work on satellites and sensors, and it's over in Azusa, California.
All right, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. We'll move on to the moderated Q&A portion of today. And for these, you all don't have to answer every single question, but if you feel like you want to chime in, whichever questions feel most relevant to you, you can. So our first question Can you each tell us about your career path so far and what led you to the work or program that you're currently doing?
It seems like we're all a little bit shy. I'll go first. So I'm a software engineer at General Motors. At school, I did a computer science and engineering major, which translates to software engineering as a career path. And prior to that, in high school, I did one computer science class. So academically speaking, that was my experience with what I ended up doing as a career. And then also, I was fortunate enough in college to do research through UCI. And that also gave me the opportunity to understand like the more theoretical side of computer science and how to apply it specifically with like mini robotics, because that's what my research was on. So I think research and just having a good understanding since high school, having a lot of experience in the coursework.
I guess I can answer this question as well. I have a little bit of an interesting path, I guess. So I did electrical engineering and now I work in computer science. And so I guess it's, some people might think it's pretty similar, but the stuff we learn in school is pretty different. So kind of how I ended up there was, let's see, I got interested in like front-end web design when I was in school just for fun. And then I also worked in a lab called Backlog where we made like IoT devices, like did some Arduino programming. I got me more interested in CS, and I actually ended up I was in grad school for like 1 quarter for IoT development, and I realized like I didn't like it, wasn't interested. So I dropped out of that program, spent like 4 months studying CS, and then I started applying to jobs, and that's how I ended up where I am now. Yeah.
I'll go. So this is Natalie. I went into civil engineering like most people, thinking I wanted to do structures. So I did an internship at a structural firm the summer after my freshman year and did not like it. And so I got an internship the following summer at another company where I was doing transportation, and I just fell in love with it and continued to work there through the summers and through the school years and got hired there after graduation. And then worked there for 2 years and then realized I'd been at the same company for 4.5 years already. So decided to make a change. And I've been at WSP for almost 1.5 years now. But that entire time I've been involved in highway projects, and it's been really interesting. And so I highly recommend doing an internship, even if you think you know exactly what you want to do.
That's actually great advice, Natalie. I completely forgot to mention it, but I had 2 software engineering experiences that really nailed it in that I wanted to do that as a career path.
Yeah, my story is actually almost exactly the same. I studied biomedical engineering, so I ended up doing a bunch of internships throughout college. One of my first ones in the biotech industry was in a pharmaceutical company, and I realized I really didn't want to do pharma, and the next option was medical devices. And so I had a couple internships in small startups throughout the Bay Area, and then right after I graduated, I got an internship in this company. And after a few months of working there, they converted me to full-time. So highly recommend getting internships just to understand the industry and what it's like and what might be your future.
So for me, actually, it was somewhat hard to understand what I wanted to do after I transferred from a community college to UCI, and especially because electrical engineering has so many different specializations, I was a little bit lost. But one of the things that I knew is that I wanted to be able to do electrical engineering for astrophysics, and luckily in UCI there was a research under Professor Stuart Kleinfelder, which was exactly this. It was
Did we lose him?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we lost him. I guess I'll fill in until he comes back. My experience is really similar to Natalie's. I actually went into UCI thinking I wanted to specialize in water, and I got my first internship and it ended up being in transportation. And my plan was, I might not know exactly what I wanted to do. So every year I'm going to get an internship in a different specialization. And I got my first internship at Mark Thomas and I ended up loving it and I never left. So I think the moral of the story that everyone's talking about is don't be afraid to pivot. You might have, one plan in college that you're like, oh, I want to, get a different intern in a different specialization every year, or I'm set on doing water or I'm set on doing structures. But if you try it out and you don't like it, or you try something else and you love it, don't be afraid to pivot from your original plan. Just let go of that control that you thought you had over your future. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, hi, this is Rashi. I'll go. I definitely agree with Janelle. You never know until you get out there and kind of see what opportunities are actually in the field. As an aerospace engineer, it sounds like it's a pretty narrow scope, but there's actually a lot that you can do within that field. I was pretty sure that I just wanted to do aerodynamics and just be a really hardcore aero person throughout my career. But I happened to, a little bit on a whim, go to this career fair at Boeing in El Segundo. I had applied for the career fair a little bit late, and they basically sent me an email saying, we have enough people, it's okay. But it's been a dream of mine to work at Boeing as someone who I've wanted to be an aerospace engineer since about halfway through high school. So went ahead and got my foot in the door anyway and got an interview for this structural engineer or stress analysis engineer position. And I've been enjoying this position a lot more than I might have initially thought. Thinking about my experience with structures in college, it wasn't necessarily my favorite class, but the industry is so different. And I'm glad that I was able to kind of break out of that mindset of, I just want to do aerodynamics. I know that this is what I want to do because this is the class that I like the most in school. It's just the industry is such a different world, and there's such a wealth of experiences out there if you just allow yourself to break free of those kind of hard set notions that you've had of what your career should look like.
All right, I'll go. So career path-wise, I don't know, I kind of gelled in with electrical engineering, kind of just doubled down and picked it. It's kind of interesting too, because I am trying to make a pivot into software. I'm currently doing a master's in CS at Georgia Tech. So we'll see what the future holds and when it comes to that. But in terms of the electronic stuff that I'm doing right now, what led me to that type of work is I always found space kind of interesting. And it's really fascinating to see this type of boom that's happening in the industry, more so with what is occurring with SpaceX and how Elon's just shooting up everything into the sky, as well as endorsing Dogecoin. But I absolutely acquiesce with what everyone else is saying, that you don't have to be too set on any one thing. And if your interests change at any point in your career, you could always make that move. I've talked to several senior and junior engineers who said they didn't know what they wanted to do for the first 5 to 10 years. And then after that, they had 10 to 20 more years for that career to specialize in. So that's my piece.
Sorry, everyone. I think I got disconnected. So just going back to what I was saying, when I actually went to UCI, I found out that there was a professor doing electrical engineering for physics, and I joined his research in my senior year. So I did research for almost 2 years with him, and I learned a lot of things that most undergraduate students don't learn by just taking the classes. And that allowed me to get an internship at Skyworks as an RF design and validation, where I started testing cell phone chips. And it opened my mind in terms of this field and what I could do related to RF. So I really thank the research for helping me find what I love and what I actually do today. But after I graduated from UCI, I started working with trains, which is totally different from what I do now. It's more like macroelectronics versus microelectronics. So I worked for Siemens Mobility testing several different types of trains for almost a year. And after that, I realized that I was not really happy. I really wanted to go back to working with RF. And luckily I applied for Qualcomm and I got the job there. And that's where I've been since August last year. So it's going to be 1 year in August.
I think we can move to the next question now, Brenda.
All right.
All right, so our next question is, why did you choose a career in engineering or your particular field of engineering? And what do you most enjoy about the work that you do? And like, again, just feel free to chime in if you resonate with the question.
I could go. Why did I choose a career in engineering? So I think, everyone, it's usually stereotypical for engineers to be like really good at math and like that's why they wanted to do it, or really good at science. But I was not good at math at all. I struggled with math. I was that kid in like your elementary, math circles. I would have to stay in at recess and like do her division on the whiteboard. Like I was that kid. And so even though it was hard for me, like I really enjoyed the challenge, and that's why I wanted to do it. And particularly about engineering is I know it's kind of lame, but like I read the engineering code of ethics and it says like we're promoting the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And my main thing was like, I want to give back to my community. So I went the civil engineering route. And when I first wanted to do civil, I had seen like Extreme Makeover Home Edition. And I was like, oh, I want to make these amazing places where people could live and like, promote like this amazing lifestyle for them. And then going into engineering, I ended up liking transportation because I fell in love with the idea of, connecting communities and making sure families could get home safely and quickly, because you know how California traffic could be. So that's what really geared me towards transportation. And the thing I enjoy most about my work is just our ability to really, enhance people's lives and connect people and communities. So that's my little piece of advice.
I can go next. So when I was choosing major for up to when I was applying for colleges, I think my mindset was kind of where like I really want to go into pre-med and eventually go into medicine, but I didn't really want to go like the traditional route of like going bio, especially because I really like math in high school, not so much physics, but like math really. And when I was kind of browsing through the catalog, like the BME pre-med major really caught my eye. And I thought it was kind of interesting blend between still kind of looking at medicine, but from an approach from the engineering aspect. So for example, like for some of the BME classes that I took, you still kind of learn about the physiology of the body, but you kind of apply math and models and all that stuff in there. And I thought it was like super fascinating. So I have no regrets going to BME pre-med. I'm still like super proud of being in the engineering school. But halfway through, I kind of had this dilemma of whether I want to go like stick with BME pre-med or kind of switch to BME and just like dive straight into engineering, just because all the projects and everything else like my friends are doing is just so fascinating. When I kind of set up my path, like my career path, it was mostly centered around like medical volunteering, doctor, like physician shadowing. So it was very still medicine oriented. I didn't really do a lot of like engineering internship just because I kind of knew that I wanted to go into medicine. So even though like kind of like presented its own challenges to being kind of being stuck at that fork way, having to choose a route, I think ultimately kind of gave me a different perspective on how I approach kind of medicine, like the way people are tackling like problems that are facing the medicine field right now. Yeah, so if there's any like BME pre-med in the audience that will want to like know more, please feel free to reach out.
So I'll jump in. I'm actually from Brazil, and when I was in Brazil in high school, I was actually traveling all over Brazil to skateboard because I used to compete in skateboarding. And in my sophomore year, I almost failed physics. So the educational system in Brazil is so different that if you fail a course, you need to retake all the other courses as well. It's almost like repeating a whole year. So I studied so much physics that I started enjoying physics. And even up to the time where I was applying to transfer from a community college, I almost applied to astrophysics. I actually applied and I got into astrophysics, but I decided to pursue a career in electrical engineering because it was more hands-on. And I think it was the best choice I made. What I enjoy most about the work I do, so I work with consumer electronics, I work with cell phones, and I feel that everything that I do in the lab ensures that the cell phone that everyone has today will work properly. So I feel very happy when a product actually succeeds and you see the phone on everyone's hands, and just thinking about the fact that I actually tested those chips.
I think going off of what everyone's kind of saying, engineering in all the different fields affects people's everyday lives. That's definitely something that made me have an interest in engineering. And then similar to Janelle, kind of thought I wanted to go into structures, and then, like I said, fell in love with transportation, but for kind of different reasons than Janelle was saying. I just fell in love with the constant evolution of mobility and transportation, how it's constantly changing, where there's so many innovations and so many, mobility is going to look so different over the course of even just my career. And so that's why I find it so interesting, because we're going to have to adapt to all these different modes of transportation as technology evolves.
I'll go next. So I'm gonna be a little unconventional with how I chose a career in engineering. After high school, I went into CC because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And there was like this math help out center, and they were like geniuses or wizards. Like when I was working on Calc 2 stuff, I kept coming up to these like groups of individuals who I just like praised as kings and queens. And I kept asking them what were they doing. And they said, oh, we're going to be engineers. I guess I'm an engineer, or I'm going to be an engineering major. And then several of them were like, yeah, I'm civil, I'm chemical or computer. So then I just did a little like digging into some of the field, and I said electrical kind of clicks. So I decided to pursue it, and it thankfully has gotten me up to this point. And the work, or I should say what I enjoy about the work that I do is, I think my company's motto before their newest one is defining possible, which is kind of a fun one. Their old one was to do work that matters. And at least at the Azusa site, what really matters about the work that we do is it's on remote sensors and satellites. And for a use case in the 2019 or 18, the California wildfires, they had the government contact our site and some other sites in Colorado as we collaborate with them. And they used and leveraged the satellites that we have up in space to help direct the firefighters towards lesser or cooler areas. So they don't, or so rather they know where to go and where not to go. And then at a bigger scale, it's for national defense. And There's some things I could say, but then I would have to kill you. No, I probably would go to prison. But some of the things that we monitor and we look for are really satisfying to know that I'm doing work that is bigger than myself, which I guess then pays into what everyone else has said about engineering, and that it can help out really everyone's lives. So that's my take.
I can go ahead and go next. This is Rashi. So I chose field in aerospace engineering because I was always really interested and passionate about astronomy and spaceflight specifically as a kid. And then took physics halfway through high school and really, really enjoyed it. So kind of marrying those two together. Also just have always loved aviation, anything that flies basically. So it was a little bit of a no-brainer, go ahead, go into aerospace engineering. As far as what I enjoy the most about the work I do, most of the assignments or projects I work on have a fairly quick turnaround, a matter of hours to maybe a couple of days. So I really enjoy the fast-paced environment that I work in. There's a certain repair that needs to get done. These are your constraints. And it's really interesting because you might see a particular type of damage 20 times and you'll repair it 20 different ways because of the practical issues that you have with, you know, what does the operator have on hand? Like, what are the tools and what are the specific, what's the specific location on the plane? What's the material? All these very kind of practical and logical ways to think about a problem pragmatically, which ultimately is, I think, a facet of just engineering in general. And at my job, I get to do that several times a day, multiple times a week. Also love knowing that I could be a small part of getting a plane up and flying when it needs to be so that people get where they need to go safely and on time. Packages get delivered when they need to safely and on time. And lastly, I really love the team that I work with, just have found some wonderful people that have become mentors and friends. And I'm definitely the least experienced person on my team. Boeing has many, many very experienced people, in particular on the team that I work on. So it's been really great that I've kind of been taken under some wings and being shown the ropes and just being able to kind of absorb knowledge from these engineers who have been in the industry for decades. It's a huge amount of just information and creativity that you can constantly pull from other people. So.
And if no one else wanted to chime in, we can go on to the next question.
Thank you, guys. So the next question is, what kinds of projects do you work on and what's a typical day like?
I can field this one. So because I started working in the pandemic, so far I've been remote. So I'll be describing my remote work schedule, which I expect to be a little bit different. I wake up, I shower, I get ready, I log on to my computer, my work computer, and check my email. Typically, I'll have some things in my inbox, either overnight bills that finished or service requests for like apps that my team manages. And if I have nothing there, then I'll check the sprint backlog. So if anyone knows anything about software engineering, we perform our work in sprints. So every 2 weeks is a new sprint. So starting today and for the next 2 weeks until next Friday is the 2-week sprint. So I have a set amount of work that my manager or my coworkers have assigned to me. So I just start knocking tasks off of it. One of them, for example, today is setting up my front end work environment for this framework called React. That may sound really dry and just maybe a lot of lingo, but if you know, you know, I guess.
I guess I'll go next. I do something pretty similar too. What do I do at work? So I guess I do what is it called? We make like websites, or I work as making like web applications. So usually I start my day, I like eat breakfast and then I do some work. We have stand up at 10, so like everybody just talks about what we're gonna do for that day. And then usually don't have too many meetings. We just like do work on tickets, whatever there is to do. I guess right now we're adding like I'm getting to like design some new components for the website and then like hook up some stuff to the back end because we're designing something new to attract more people and grow profits. But yeah.
So civil engineering's day looks a little bit different than that, I would say. Starts pretty similarly in the fact that I check my emails, but then from there on out, you know, there's hours of time where I'm just in CAD working on tasks that I need to get done, but a lot of my day is spent on the phone. So if you went into engineering because you aren't a very social person, don't go into civil engineering. That probably is the most communicative field. We are constantly on the phone with clients. There's so much coordination, working with Metro and Caltrans. All of our projects require a lot of communication skills on top of your engineering skills. So some days I'm on the phone for 6 hours. Some days I am working the entire day, so it kind of varies. But if you are somebody who's a people person, civil engineering is really great.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of Natalie. So I'm also civil, also roadway. And since I just graduated last year, I could say that every day I spend is learning something new. I'm also working from home. So I'll start my day rolling out of bed, walking probably, I don't know, a foot to my desk, and checking my emails. Usually I check my emails and I'll see what tasks I have for the day. So right now I'm assigned to one project, right? So we're widening a highway in Santa Barbara. And for that, I'm in charge of the stage construction. So for stage construction, you have to figure out how you're going to move traffic at different phases of your construction. Because if we close the whole freeway, you guys are going to be upset, right? If you can't use the freeway at all. So maybe in one stage, we'll push the traffic to all of the traffic to the southbound lanes and work on the northbound. And then the next stage, we'll push it to the opposite side or push it to the middle. And we have to figure out how to reroute traffic safely. So right now I have to learn how to, one, translate what they drew in CAD in 2D and see if it's working in 3D. So you might lay out the lines, you know, if you're looking at your plans aerially, looks all good. And then you put it in 3D and you have your road cutting into a bridge or a structure. So I have to look at our models in 3D, make sure they make sense. If they don't, I have to get on the phone with our team. Let's say, you know, our road is cutting into a drainage inlet. I might have to call the drainage team and say, hey, is it possible for you to move your inlet? Because it might be a little easier if you can move your inlet than for me to realign our entire road. So definitely, like Natalie said, it's a lot of communication. You're putting out fires constantly is what we like to say. If your project is affecting somebody else, you need to make sure you're communicating. And at the end of the day, hopefully you have a good project that you could turn into your team and to the client. So definitely, you might know exactly what you're doing, but if you can't communicate that to your client or to the public, it might work perfectly, but they might not want it because you can explain it to them. So definitely just communicating with not only your team, but to the public as well is really important. And that's what we do day to day.
I can jump in.
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, Sophia. So just piggybacking off what Janelle and Natalie were saying, same thing, lots of communication. Since we are customer support, it is directly going back and forth with our airline customers to make sure, you know, they send us what damage that they need help with repairing. We go ahead and communicate, the plans after doing the analysis. That's what I do on our end. So being very clear, detailed, precise about every single step in a repair. If they have certain issues that come up on their end, they go ahead and communicate with us. And it's always incredibly helpful when everyone involved is very detailed and specific about what they're talking about. So that's one thing I would say I didn't realize in college. I didn't realize how much of working in the engineering industry would involve having those really precise, like written communication skills. I was obviously just really focused on the technical stuff, like I imagine many people are as engineering students. But going into the industry, there are so many facets of communicating a certain design or even just a material or something like that. There's detail that goes into that makes a lot of sense to you because it's just in your brain. And then when you have to put it down on paper or type, I suppose it's a completely different story. But anyway, so typical day is, I'm also working remotely. So roll out of bed, get onto the computer, log on. I have a lead on my team who will assign out report or repairs to the analysts on the team, who will then go ahead and take a look at them, see how the damage needs to be repaired and what's acceptable and any other steps that go into that. In a typical day, I will do usually 2 to 3 repairs, maybe a little bit less if things are a little bit calmer, or maybe more if things are not calmer. And so like I've mentioned before, pretty quick turnaround. There will be times where an airline will, call one of our engineers or send us a report that needs to be turned around within an hour or two. So we're all kind of ready and prepared for whenever that comes up. There's always someone on call in my team. There's many other teams within Boeing Commercial Airplanes customer support that have people working shift 1, 2, and 3. So there are people who start working at 3 p.m. to like midnight, and then midnight to 8 a.m. So luckily I am on shift 1. So that's a pretty typical 7 to 4 p.m. type of schedule. But it's nice because every single day you do have that satisfaction of I've completed something. You could start a day never having seen this damage before, never having interacted with this plane before. And then by the end of the day, you have completed a repair and gotten a message to the customer, which hopefully they will be able to work with and be satisfied with that response. So there's always a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction at the end of the day. And I really enjoy having that with the quick turnarounds. Sorry, Sophia, go ahead.
No worries. This is Sophia. I can go next. I was hired during the pandemic, but I actually do work on site. I'm actually in my office right now. So it's actually a really great experience for me to learn about the company during a pandemic and how we handle that kind of stuff. But I work as a quality engineer. Our main product is a really, really massive machine that helps detect and treat stage 4 cancer. It's a really, really complicated product. And so as a quality engineer, I do have to help inspect every single subassembly build and the system level build as well to make sure that everything is compliant with our FDA regulations, but also that it's built correctly and it wouldn't hurt the patient in the end. So that's pretty much my day. I'm on the manufacturing floor every day. I make sure that there's no problems. And if there are, then I help make a game plan with the engineers or the manufacturing engineers to figure out how we can fix the problem and how to document it correctly. Other projects I work on are setting up processes to make sure that we're building everything correctly and that we're documenting everything, including the issues that come up on the manufacturing floor. So it is a lot of fun. And I think the main takeaway for me so far has just been how much more empathy I thought there would be in this kind of job. You wouldn't think that for something in engineering that's so technical, but especially in quality, you really have to think about the end goal and how it might affect the patient in the end, because above all, we're making things that can help heal people and humans, and they're the ones that go into the machine. And you really have to think long-term, even if it's like a minor decision that you're making, it does have some kind of risk in the end. And you really have to think about the human side of things when you're making these kinds of decisions.
So for me as a radio frequency characterization and validation engineer at Qualcomm, what I pretty much do, because a cell phone has so many different components, so many different chips, but the chip that I am focused on is the chip that transmits and receives all the different signals coming from your voice. So as you can think, at a certain period of time, millions of people are using the cell phone at the same time. So what I test is mostly, can we filter the signals and make sure that one person can communicate with the other person while still receiving a really good signal? Are you close to a cell phone tower? And if so, then your chip doesn't need to have such a large signal. So in the lab, what a typical day for me looks like is testing all these different parameters in different benches, different lab benches with different types of electronic equipments. And that's pretty much what I used to do in UCI and research, what I did throughout all my classes and all the different labs. So it's a lot of fun for me because it's almost like I have a new lab assignment every day to do. And then I need to write a lab report and send it out to the team. And as an undergraduate student, I feel very lucky because I am the only person in my whole team that does not have a graduate degree, because it's such a specific field. And I've been learning a lot since I joined Qualcomm. I think it's been a really amazing opportunity. But in terms of a cell phone chip project, usually they last for a year, and the chips are designed for the following 2 years. And the schedule is really tight, but I think it's a lot of fun because I get to actually be a test engineer, but be as close to a designer without being a designer, which pretty much require a PhD if you want to be a designer in this field.
I just want to add something. Like, I guess like when we're in school, like I had this like misconception that like every day I just be like working on technology, and like, maybe if I was doing engineering, I'd be like solving engineering problems. And like that's really not like what working is. It's like you just have to talk to a lot of people. You're always in meetings. And I guess like for us, like the fun part of engineering is like kind of like only half of the amount of work that you have to do. Like at least to me, like the fun part of engineering is actually like solving problems. But then there's like the other part of engineering where you got to like talk to your manager, you got to like set up meetings with the customers or like your product managers or your other managers. And there's that like whole other side of engineering that I guess like we're not really exposed to in school, but it's definitely part of the job.
Great, thank you everyone. And our next question, do you think your experiences at UCI prepared you well for your career? And some of you have touched on this a bit already, but what opportunities and experiences at UCI were the most valuable to you?
I'll go. I think I was the one who graduated the longest ago. So looking back on UCI, when I was in school, I was involved in a lot of different things, and I was on the cheer team, and I was in a sorority, and I was in a bunch of engineering clubs and societies. And through all of those experiences, gained a lot of really valuable social skills. That's something that you don't learn in the classroom. And like we were just talking, it is imperative in pretty much every field of engineering. And so my recommendation would be to get involved in any way that you can, because UCI has so many different opportunities that would really appeal to anybody. There's just, I don't even know, hundreds of clubs and different societies and different ways to get involved and connected. So when you look back on your college days, you're going to remember those experiences rather than, sitting in a lecture hall.
I second that.
This is Rashi. Definitely agree with that as well. at UCI, I wasn't necessarily involved in too many different experiences, but I stuck to a couple of things for a long time. I was a peer academic advisor, just like the current PAs that are on the call right now, for 3 years. That taught me so much about communication and being very clear in explaining something to someone. Any student that comes in is going to have a different issue, and you might have the same set of tools to work with. And then you need to go ahead and communicate, say, like a class plan or something like that for a certain quarter. There are more similarities to that to daily working life than I realized. Just making sure that you are communicating very effectively in written communication as well, emails, and making sure that you are always specific and precise. Also, I was part of the UAV Forge design project. I was part of the finance team, and then my senior year, I was the project manager. So in terms of what Enoch was talking about, of setting up those meetings and that kind of side of engineering, of are you communicating effectively? I know we've all been saying that a lot, but it really is such a big deal. And making sure that everyone has the time and the space to share their ideas. And that was something that I hope I was able to facilitate as a project manager, and has definitely helped me now when, say in a large meeting, how to speak up and actually use my voice, and make sure that if I have an idea, I'm actually saying it. Because it's one thing to have ideas when you're, doing a homework assignment or in an exam or something like that, like a very academic context. But then when you're working with a group of people and everyone has their own ideas and viewpoints and expertise to bring in, how to kind of listen to everyone and also go ahead and say your piece. So those two experiences were very important to the skills that I now use on a daily basis at work.
I would say for me, sorry, Fernando.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
For me, my boss, when I was interning, I got my internship after my second year at UCI, and I was only interning for the summer. And I said I wasn't going to work during my third year because third year is the hardest for civil. So I was like, I'll come back in the summer, I promise, but not during the school year. And our president told me, he's like, oh, no, it's okay. He's like, just drop out. He's like, you'll learn more like 1 year at work than you'll learn at school. And I just want to put that out there. Like, if you're having trouble with your classes, a lot of the time, at least for civil, like, correct me if I'm wrong for the other majors, it's not exactly what you're going to be doing at work. Like, some of the courses that I took, never going to touch that at work. But what UCI taught me was to figure out how to learn. How do I learn? And a lot of the time, like especially in remote working from home, you need to figure out, one, what's the problem? Why isn't it working? You need to be able to problem solve and figure out, okay, why am I not understanding this? How would I be able to understand it? Because for me, how I learn is, okay, I need to read the standards. Let me go through the standards first. And then if I still don't understand it, then let me figure out what I don't understand. Then I'll come back to my manager and say, hey, like, this is exactly what my problem is. And I think this is how I would solve it, but it's not working. Like, can you help me out? Because when you're at work, they're definitely investing time in you and they want you to learn, and they'll try to help you as much as they can. But managers get busy, and sometimes, they have meetings all day and they can't get back to you. So it's really learning how to be self-sufficient and figuring out how you learn best and being able to communicate that to your manager. Because if they don't understand how you learn and you're learning from them, then, you're both going to be stuck, because you're not gonna be able to solve the problem like that, because you're not able to work together. So definitely at UCI, just the different group projects and figuring out like how each other works, how each other learns and communicates. That's probably the best experiences I got at UCI, was working in different teams. And like everyone said, the different leadership opportunities. I was president of ASCE, and it gave me a lot of opportunities to speak to small groups, to, children in elementary school to groups of 200 plus people. So I got a lot of different types of public speaking opportunities. So being able to explain something to a kindergartner is the same or more important than being able to talk to the 200 professionals, because if you can't talk to your community and get them to understand what you're doing, then it's not going to help them. So being able to communicate with all different levels of people from different backgrounds is really what UCI taught me the most. And I hope you guys pay attention to it, because I know team projects could be a little stressful, but that's really how work's going to be. You need to learn how to work with different people. So definitely take value from those trying experiences.
So at least for me, I think that some of the most valuable experiences I had were definitely outside of the classroom. I think I haven't really shared this with anyone, but when I transferred from a community college, I actually failed 3 classes. I was in academic probation for 1 year and 1 quarter. And what really brought me back on track was becoming an engineering ambassador, because I felt the connectivity with the school. I felt like I had a purpose again, to become an actual ambassador for the school and share my story as an international student who worked really hard to be where I was at that time. And Janelle actually can agree with this, because when I joined, I was so shy to speak in front of other people. But I learned how to communicate. I learned how to share about my experiences inside of the classroom and what classes that I enjoyed the most, what were some of the career paths that you could choose as an electrical engineering student in UCI. And I think that was probably the most valuable thing I've done, was just trying to be involved within the school. And besides from this, also doing research, because the research allowed me to learn things that no other undergraduate student would be able to without actually doing research. And the job that I have today is actually more like a graduate degree level job. And I only got that job because of the research that I did. And it all comes back to being able to communicate properly, because all I did was send out one simple email expressing my interest in the research, and I got the research position. So even after I was in academic probation, the fact that I was involved in school allowed me to bring my GPA back up. I became senior design team leader. I did research for 2 years. I was an engineering ambassador for 2 different programs. And I really thank, the whole School of Engineering for even creating this program, because that really brought me back on track.
I think this will be our last question before the audience Q&A.
Yep. So next question is, what advice do you all have for students who are interested in your particular field of engineering?
For my field, just, it's not a technical thing, but I think for civil engineering, the industry is incredibly small, super, super small. You'll be so surprised at where you'll see the same people come up in your life in different instances. And I actually met Natalie at a conference, and, I never thought, I'd run into her again, and here we are on the same panel. So something that just to keep in mind is the industry is so small, so small. And it's really important not to burn bridges. You might not get along with every single person you meet or every team you're on, but it's important to, figure out how to communicate with people that you meet. They might not be your best friend, but as long as you guys respect each other and you're able to communicate and get the job done, that's what's most important. And you never know, I've worked with someone before, and, they weren't the best teammate on one of my group projects in college. And, their resume came in for what our company, and they asked me my experience with them. And, I have to be honest. So even in school, just working in your team projects, like you never know who the person in your class might end up being your boss one day. So definitely just be respectful, try to help everyone, because you never know when they'll come back into your life.
Yeah, Janelle, the exact same scenario happened to me where there was somebody that was, didn't pull their weight ever in college. And then, they were applying at my company and I was asked if I knew, what they were like and what their work ethic was. And you don't ever want to recommend somebody that you don't think will do a good job. So you have to be honest. And so it is a very small world. But with that being said, civil, and I'm sure every single type of engineering, there's so many avenues you can take. UCI breaks it down into water, transportation, and structures, but even underneath those three things, there's 20 different things you could be doing. You could be doing highway design, but you could also be, designing pipelines, or you could be doing geotech or traffic engineering. There's just so many different things that you could do. And so it's kind of overwhelming at first. Like I remember my first year after I graduated, everyone was asking what exactly I wanted to do. And I was like, I have no idea. So don't get overwhelmed by that, because as long as you work hard, opportunities will just kind of fall in your lap. And I think that most people will tell you they kind of fell into where they're at, and that's where they feel like they belong. So don't feel like you have to have everything figured out.
Definitely never give up. Because I think, at least for me, like I had a pretty hard time finding a job. And like it's like I would like go to interviews, like just like bomb the interview, go back, study more, go back and interview again, do a little bit better this time. And then like and also it takes like it takes a lot of time to like find interviews too, definitely. I guess depending on your industry, but like if you are applying to jobs and like you feel like why aren't I getting any calls back or anything like that, it's not always you or your resume. A lot of the times it's just the needs of the companies, or even like just the fiscal cycle. Like companies tend more to hire in January compared to like June or December, and so just don't give up.
I would say I have two pieces of information. One is definitely invest in a nice chair. As a software engineer, I spend 90% of my time sitting in a chair, and that was before the pandemic. And so now you can imagine my life now. My second piece of advice is to do personal projects and to find the area of engineering that you're passionate about. I was very passionate and am very passionate about computer science and electrical engineering and working with hardware. So I would make things with my Raspberry Pi, like a magic mirror, and that's what my senior design project was. Or like earlier this pandemic, I put a motion sensor in my closet and turned it into a motion sensor activated light. So now I don't have to touch my lights again. So try to make it fun for yourself. And, I guess if I had to draw that to a parallel to other majors, if you're like a civil engineer and you really like water, I guess, or bridges, each time you look at a bridge, try to figure out like, what was their idea behind this bridge, try to make it personal.
This is Rashi, I'll jump in. I'm sure this applies to most fields of engineering, but just speaking from my experience in aerospace, not just even at my company, but when I was applying and interviewing and meeting people from all across the industry, there is such a huge wealth of knowledge in aerospace. People have been in this industry, like largely people get into this industry and then just stay there, specifically aviation. So there's people in my team or people that I have met along the way who, you'll be having a discussion with them and they're like, oh yeah, I remember when we were coming up with the idea for that particular design. Or, I remember when I was working with the FAA on coming up with that particular CFR or something like that. And you're just blown away by like, wow, that was 35 years ago and you have so much knowledge. And That can be very intimidating. I have definitely faced that where it's like, what am I doing here? You know, there's people who have 40 years of experience and I'm fresh out of college. What am I bringing to this team, et cetera? What you're bringing is, number one, your own unique perspective, and number two, the ability to learn. You know, we have so much experience that goes out the door when people retire. So what you can do is ask questions and learn from them. Great piece of advice that I got in college from one of my TAs was just keep asking the right questions. When you don't know something and you feel intimidated maybe by someone else's knowledge, or someone says something that, you know, sometimes as engineers, there's something technical that we understand so inherently that we'll bring it up in conversation and someone else doesn't know what we're talking about. Ask someone to clarify. It's okay to always make sure that you understand what you're talking about, what someone else is talking about, and don't be afraid of not knowing something, because that's just an opportunity to learn. And I truly hope that everyone finds a place where they feel like they can ask those questions and feel comfortable admitting when they don't know something. As long as you have an open mind and a willingness to learn and grow, that's something that's incredibly important, because you are certainly not going to come out of school or even any given experience at a company knowing everything about your field, or even really knowing everything about your project. You're working on it with different people who have all different kinds of expertise and viewpoints that they're bringing in. So if you don't know something, just think of it as an opportunity to learn, and make sure you're asking questions and taking notes.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important advice I can give is to never give up. When I was in UCI, the internship that I got during my senior year, I did not even take the required courses to do that internship until I was midway through the internship. But it was all the experiences that I had before, and the fact that I was able to prove that I had the potential to become someone good for the company, that I actually landed that internship. And I was so passionate for that field that I finally found something that I love doing, working with cell phones, testing chips. Like, this is my call. But then during that time, Trump banned Huawei, and the company that I used to work for went into a hiring freeze. So they couldn't hire me full time. And because I'm a foreign student, I only had a very limited amount of time to find a job. And luckily, one of my friends from my fraternity actually helped me get a job at Siemens Mobility testing trains. But I was not really happy with that situation, because I did not study to do that. I wanted to work with cell phones, but I embraced the opportunity. I never really gave up. And in fact, during my first 2 months in that company, there was another opportunity to go to Chicago to test trains. And I took the opportunity not knowing what could happen. And 1 month later, I became the propulsion test lead, testing propulsion systems for the new metro trains in Chicago. And I say never give up, because even though it was something that I was not really wanting to do, which was test trains, the fact that I became the propulsion test lead at such a young age, with less than 1 year of experience out of college, really looked good in my resume and really allowed me to persuade everyone at Qualcomm that, maybe this kid has an opportunity to become someone even better, even though he doesn't have a graduate degree. So the fact that I never give up allowed me to be where I am today, which is exactly where I always wanted to be, working with cell phones and testing RF chips. And it's just something that will always happen. Many obstacles are going to come up in your life, and you should never give up. Even though you're doing something that you don't like at that moment, you will reach whatever you want.
All right, I just wanted to give one last chance if anyone else wanted to chime in on this question. Otherwise, we can go ahead and move on to the audience Q&A. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, you can feel free to drop it in the chat or unmute yourselves.
I have a question for Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry, since you're actually doing pre-med or you are in medical school, how much did it actually prepare you to be where you are today? You know, actually doing pre-med versus just the regular BME program.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually kind of thinking about that throughout this panel, like seeing some of the questions. And that's some of the questions I got a lot from some of the engineering ambassador, like the preview day at UCI, but back when I was, we're still in school. I would say half and half. So yes, some of the engineering classes that I took, let's say programming, like MATLAB, LabVIEW, they're not contributing to my medical school right now at all. But I think what really helped was like the process and the mentality of approaching things in a different way. And I think because engineering classes were just so hard that everyone would in engineering, like the mindset of you don't have to score like super high. You don't have a high GPA to get like an internship per se. It's more about experience. And I think that gives me mentality like, oh, I don't have to, I'm not really kind of defined by a number. So versus say some of my other classmates here at med school who kind of came from more of a traditional bio pre-med. And I think just because that bio pre-med undergrad is just so competitive that every single test, every single GPA point and kind of that matters to them. And I think me coming from an engineering background, knowing that, yes, I guess important to study hard, do well, but then, if I particularly don't perform too well on a test, it's not the end of the world. So I think kind of having that mentality and then that experience in just teamwork and working with on engineering projects for classes that really just made me a little bit more relaxed in a sense. But yeah, I think one thing that did kind of come through in one of my classes last year was that we were learning. So my school is an osteopathic medical school, so we do hands-on manipulation as well. And one of the things that we learned was the stress strain curve for tissues and collagens, all that stuff. And then I completely forgot for my BME, I think it's 111, we had to take a tissue stress strain material science or something. And I emailed the professor that I had clarifying the concepts. And so I think in a sense, the engineering concepts don't necessarily apply directly to medicine, but in terms of the future, let's say if depending on this discipline that I go into, some doctors have to work with biomedical engineering, for say surgical equipment, like choke cards, all that stuff. So having that sort of background and knowledge how to communicate with them, I think will kind of serve me in the long run. It's just that in school, right, when I'm in school right now, the materials haven't really applied. Yeah, having that background I think is pretty unique. And yeah, it seems like there's some questions.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat, and I also had a question as well. My question was directed at Mark. So I noticed that you mentioned that you're working full-time, but also that you're pursuing a master's degree in, I think it was computer science. And I'm actually computer science and engineering, and I've not really figured out exactly what I want to do after graduating, whether I want to just start working full-time right away, or maybe pursue a master's, or maybe do both, which I think is what you're doing, but not entirely sure. So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that. I think the other two questions, if I could just read it out. Carolina asked, when you first started out, how did you deal with being less experienced or finding footing in a new team. And Evangeline, sorry if I butcher your name, she asked that she's going to graduate school in EECS, but she was a math major in undergrad, and her specialization is in power amplify. She asks, do you suggest me to continue a specialization like this, or do you recommend me to choose? What recommend me to choose since I was? Oh, what do you recommend me to choose since I was a math major during undergrad? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll answer your question. I'm currently working full time, so getting those 80 hours in per pay period, so over 2 weeks, as well as doing school part time. This last semester, which just ended like last Monday, I took like 2 courses, and I was kind of feeling myself, to be honest. After I did 1 course my first spring semester, I said I could do 2, and then it was just like throwing me against the walls. And then work was like, okay, we got different projects for you to do. So then I found myself like having all-nighters where I would be working on a project. And it was kind of funny because I'd be like coding something up and be like, yeah, this is going to be an all-nighter, which it was, leading into the workday. And then it's just like pumping myself with caffeine, trying to like get the basics of what I have to do done. So maybe it was because of a combination of like hard courses, because there was like one was a hard course, it was artificial intelligence, and then the other was like a medium easy course, which was HCI. So it was a hard balance. There are definitely times where I was messing up because I got burnt out. And I guess I might be a masochist because I signed up for 2 classes next semester too, and I'm taking a summer class which starts in like a week from now. But anyways, I think it's great to be working and then also do it part-time, because you get that paycheck that you could support yourself on top of, getting some courses under your belt to learn something new that you like, that is satisfying. And your company can pay for it, so that's also nice. There are some, there's some devils in the details when it comes to writing out those contracts for them like doing the handshake agreement. And on top of that, like after depending on some industries that you're in, like with the defense industry, it's a catapult when you get your graduate degree into different programs. Like there's this really cool rotational leadership program that requires like a degree from top 15 university to be in. Naturally, you just like get a pay bump from doing it. So there's that financial incentive. But I have like other things I wanted to do. Like I'm similar with Fernando. I have a community college background. So eventually I want to try to dabble in being like a community college instructor and work. So I don't know, it's really just trying to find a program that fits you well. Like it's the OMSCS program for Georgia Tech, and everything's given asynchronously remote. Tons of students in the program. We have this hilarious subreddit page where people are just, very facetious and just posting content, as well as students just helping out on Slack channels. And it's kind of wild when like, I'm by definition an electrical engineer, and I'm having a problem with like this API as part of the project, and somebody from like Microsoft is having the same problem as me. So sometimes I get to collaborate with people I never would have collaborated. Overall, I think the program is great. I would recommend to do both, as I guess I'm biased that I'm doing both, so I guess it's confirmation bias. But do your own research, go on those internet forums, see what's up, or even like go on LinkedIn and see if there's a grad school you want to go to, or like a company you want to be a part of, and even just like cold call them and just see what's up. You never know how friendly some people are, and they might have like a arrangement for a call, or they might just drop in some advice in the chat. So that's my take.
I can add a little bit onto that. We're a little bit fortunate that we are in tech and computer science, where it's not really a requirement that you have to have a master's degree. A master's degree typically will net you more money each year in salary, and it may open up the path to promotion over other candidates. But comparing it to other engineering disciplines where you sort of need that master's degree to get to that next level, that's not there in computer science or in CSE. On the other hand, there are a lot of companies that will pay and try to sponsor you for your master's program. GM is currently I spoke with my boss and he said that GM is willing to pay for my master's program if I want to pursue it. So now all that's left is to get in. So that's something that I'll actively be trying to do because the option has been laid in front of me and it's free, and why shouldn't I? So whatever your situation affords.
I'll go ahead and answer Evangeline's question. So I think that inside of electrical engineering, there's just so many different specializations and things that you can do. As a math major, you have all the math foundation to do well in any of them, because math it's the basis for every engineering or even physics. So it should be fairly easy to transition as long as you pick a specialization that uses certain aspects of math that you're more comfortable with. So at least with what I do, it might sound simple. I deal with a lot of trigonometry because it's mostly sines and cosine waves and multiplying cosine waves and trying to understand about different types of interferences and frequencies and amplitude shifts. So, but I don't deal that much with double and triple integrals, where people that do electromagnetics would deal more with trying to solve double and triple integrals. So I think that doing power amplifier might be a little bit challenging, but if you have a strong foundation, if you study before you go to graduate school or try to get that knowledge in circuit design, you will do just fine. But maybe try to do a little bit more research in what types of fields in electrical engineering use what types of math, and that might answer your question on your own.
I just want to add, like, your major, your specialization doesn't really define like what you're going to be doing after you graduate. I think a lot of the times, like, we're pretty young, like maybe we're only like a quarter of the way through our lives, but for most like people, they go through like multiple career changes throughout their lives. And even now, like I had 4 friends, or like I had 3 other friends who were electrical engineering with me. Now none of us are doing electrical engineering. Another one is in software, one is in QA, and one is working at a marijuana company. So like honestly, it doesn't really matter. You'll be able to figure out something as long as you're interested in engineering or technology.
I want to add. Oh, I want to just add something real quick. If you're doing math, computer science is like, pretty similar. So I would try just doing one CS class and see if the CS part of EECS is something you like.
Yeah, that's very true. Like I just remembered that like I was speaking to like a math friend, I think it was last year when I was taking discrete math, and like basically the curriculum is really similar for discrete math for both under the math department and under the CS department. So very similar.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but I was going to move on to Carolina's question about, what do you do being the least experienced and how do you deal with that? My advice is to just own it. You're the least experienced. There's nothing that you can do about that. Be honest about what you don't know. Ask questions, because they don't expect you to be on the same page as somebody who has 5 more years of experience as you do. So kind of take advantage of the fact that this is the time where they expect the least out of you. So, get a mentor, learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, but also just be easy on yourself and be humble, because, you don't know as much as they do. So, yeah.
And also just to add on to that, as the least experience, you're not looking at something every day like they were. Like a lot of people, they'll start working on something and it's like tunnel vision. You've been in the weeds for a month, you've been looking at the same thing and you can't figure it out. And now this new perspective comes in and you're like, hey, like, why are we doing this? And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, like I've been like so focused on this one little tiny problem that I didn't even like look at the big picture. Because for example, like I was at work and we were trying to get this drainage system to work and it wasn't working in the existing conditions. Like if you were to go out there and it rains, like the manholes would be popping off, kind of like how they are at UCI. But the manholes are popping off, so you know it's not working correctly. Like it's definitely over capacity, and we're trying to add more water to it. So I was like, why are we adding more water to it if it already doesn't work? I was like, why don't we just send the water over there, like in another direction? And they're like, oh my God, like I didn't even think to send it to the other direction because we were so focused on trying to get it to work into one, outlet when we could send it to the ocean instead. So just having that fresh perspective and asking questions, it won't only help you understand concepts, but it might bring up things that, people just forget about because they're so focused on one tiny aspect of the problem because they've been working on it for so long. So definitely own it. And definitely, I'm 5 foot nothing. I look very young, and most of my office is, definitely alpha males. So in terms of like getting your opinion out there during meetings, there's a lot of people who like to talk and give their opinions. And if, you feel a little nervous about saying something when it's kind of like a more alpha environment, maybe, raise your hand. We're in this Zoom, virtual environment, like put your hand up. They'll see it there. They'll ask you a question, or even if you just message in the chat, just, putting your little thoughts in there, saying like, hey, like, I know you guys are talking about this, but have you thought about this? Or I'm not understanding this. Never be afraid to put in your opinions, just because people are louder than you. So just putting that out there, especially when you're first starting. I know it could be intimidating to offer a solution when you feel like, who am I to give my, perspective if I've only been here for a little bit. But there's value in every perspective. Just remember that.
That actually reminds me of something my dad once told me, Janelle. He said, if you're the dumbest person in the room, you're doing something right. So if you're feeling the least experienced, you're in the right place.
Yeah, and at least for me, since I work on site, sometimes it's very hard for me to find a solution to the problem that I have at that moment, because my specific team, most of the people are remote, and then it's going to take time for me to ask them questions. Sometimes they're in other meetings, where if I just go to someone that is in the lab that I never met before, but I ask a question, I not only get the answer very quickly, even though I don't know what I'm doing, I create a new connection so that in the future, I can always go to this person. And I think that this was one of the priorities that I had when I joined Qualcomm, especially being the only person who has an undergraduate degree. I felt very shy, and I felt not undervalued, but I felt lower than all of them because everyone has a graduate degree. I'm afraid of asking a stupid question, but there is no such thing as stupid question. Because if you ask questions and if you meet people by asking them questions, it's going to show that you actually have the potential of being as good as them in a quicker manner. All you have to do is just ask anything that's on your mind and just try to understand not only how to do the job, but also what are some of the reasons behind it, so then you can teach someone else next.
Curiosity is definitely a very good thing to have.
All right, well, it is almost 7:30 and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we're going to end here, and thank you all again so much for taking the time to be with us today and share your perspectives and advice.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having
everyone.
us.
Thanks for having
Everyone.
us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.